Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today, we are hearing from the founders behind a company working at the intersection of artificial intelligence, high stakes decision making, and applied research. Tomorrow is building infrastructure that's designed to make AI safer, truly innovative, and deployable in environments where trust, accountability, and real world consequences really matter. I'll speak first with Marcus Benjamin. He's the founder and CEO about the origin of this company, the vision behind it, and why this moment matters. Then I'll sit down with Charlie Williams, whose background in quantitative finance, global capital allocation, and risk management brings together another critical perspective to this important work. It is my pleasure now to welcome Mr. Marcus Benjamin to the conversation. As I mentioned, the founder and CEO of Tomorrow and the founder of Benjamin Strategy Advisors. Your background, of course, spans strategy, corporate finance, and futures thinking. And your work is also centered on helping organizations to really make better decisions in complex environments. I have to tell you, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know that you are also a person where your faith is really essential to the work that you do and the way that you show up in the world. So thank you for sitting down for this conversation.
Judy, I'm glad you're here and couldn't think about anybody else that I would have wanted to do this conversation with, so fantastic.
Well, let's start with the origins, right? Where did this idea come from to start this company, and talk a little bit about the problems that you were trying to address, trying to resolve in launching Tomorrow?
Well, we did strategy consulting for nearly 20 years. So we worked with companies making strategic decisions, dealing with complex risk management as they were looking to grow their portfolio through acquisition, through new market entry, et cetera. So we spent years doing that. But unfortunately, I got sick during COVID and ended up being on dialysis for about 10 months. I was out of my company for nearly 2 years. So during that period, our company went through a drastic transformation. Thankfully, we were still able to pay our employees, the ones that we had, pay our consultants, and satisfy our obligations there. But I knew I had to re-envision the company. And while I was on dialysis, I ended up reading what is called now the attention paper. And it's one of the seminal documents that form the foundation for every large language model that exists. And when I was reading that, I'm like, hold on for a second. If this generative AI thing really takes off the way that this paper is really laying it out, then the value of information in the future is going to be zero.
Wow.
Knowledge work is going to change forever. What we called knowledge work in 2020 and 2021 is going to change forever. Mm-hmm. And a startup could actually compete with McKinsey. So that was the dynamics that I was thinking through when I read the attention paper, and that's what caused me to re-envision the company.
Listen, and I want to talk about the vision of the company and how you were able to harness really that idea, those concepts to be able to move forward to what you're launching now. But I don't want people to miss that you didn't fall into the why me mentality. Because when you're confronted with a challenge like that, a health challenge, and it derails everything that you're in the middle of, and so many other people are dependent upon you, there's something you have to tap into to even be able to receive the information that's in front of you. What was that allowed you not to fall off into that why me mentality and to really be able to, even in those moments, to think forward to tomorrow?
Yeah, so a key moment was at MUSC, and MUSC did a fantastic job. I mean, great care team, et cetera. Of course, personal care team. My wife, my son, my daughter, they were in college. My son was in college. My daughter was at the governor's school. They were coming home helping. But a key moment was I was at MUSC, and I was looking out of the window, and I was praying, and I was in tears, and I was upset. And I felt the Lord telling me, I hear your tears. I record your tears. I'm aware of where you are, but your tears won't change your situation.
Come on now.
And so resilience had to kick in at that point.
Yes.
Like, it could have been continued in, why is this happening to me? What's my life going to be like? But at that point, it was a change where it was like, no, you're right. I'm going to start anticipating a better future. I mean, so from that day to the present, even though my faith was strong then, my faith in
Yes.
God grew exponentially because I no longer saw myself as just continuing to be on dialysis or, somewhat having a drastic life change.
Yeah.
I began to say, no, okay, what is my company going to be like when I'm done? When I'm back in my so
Yes.
building the company became an expression of faith because I believed that what I was experiencing was only temporary.
Well, and you could see yourself in the future.
I could see
You know,
it.
that promise that he gives us. And that's why I don't want people to miss over or skip over that part, because what you learn in the dark, you are required to share in the light. And I know that aspect of the story is going to inspire the many people who see this and benefit from your story. And it also plays into the fact that your background is not a typical founder,
Right.
in this AI space, right?
Right.
And so you look at not only the way this idea came to you, but your background and area of expertise. Talk a little bit about your experience and the strategy in future thinking that really helped you to shape this company.
Yeah, so as a consultant, you're trained to do, root cause analysis. I mean, you're trained to do, what we call MECE, which is a way of, excluding certain variables that have no benefit or value toward making a complex decision, how to structure, arguments and strategic direction. So with those things I was trained on. As a financial advisor, of course, I'm trained to think 20, 30 years ahead, help people plan, look long term, et cetera. So leveraging all of those things together with a modest background in computer science. Most people don't know that I went to college as a computer science major, and I switched because my advisor, several things happened, but the most important was my advisor was like, you're going to be here for 6 years if you're talking about getting married. So I ended up getting married to Omiko while I was in college. I switched to my major to business and finance. So my background in that sense, from a academic, with the MBA in corporate strategy, with my work with corporate strategy, candidly, Judah, I thought that it actually prepared me to be the right kind of founder in the AI space. Because what happens typically is you have an AI founder who is a data engineer, a scientist of some sort, or a pure programmer, but they've never sat in an executive seat before. They never had to sit down with CEOs helping them make strategic and complex decisions. They were never responsible for mergers and acquisitions where there was significant capital responsibility. So even though it was non-traditional in the technology sense, but in the sense of understanding how this should really work in business, I'm the kind of person, my partner's the kind of person, and hopefully we inspire others. We're the kind of people who really should be at the forefront of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. It's one thing to contemplate a concept. It's something completely different to take it to something that's real, something that's credible and tangible. What were the biggest challenges early on in launching Tomorrow?
No one understood what we were doing. That's
a challenge.
That was the first challenge. It's like, hold on, why are you doing it that way? Don't approach it that way. Because the people that I talked to initially were all computer people. And there's a way computer scientists and engineers think, and it's beneficial in certain contexts. But to create something that hasn't really existed before or do it in a completely different way, you need someone who thinks differently. So I had to really stop talking to those people, and I had to identify the one person that I need to talk to. And of course, you will be talking to him a little bit later, who Charlie Williams, he became a co-founder with us, because I needed someone who had extensive quantitative understanding or the ability to really drill down, what we call into the dirty details. And then someone who also had significant corporate experience, and not just a professional title, but decision making that had consequence attached to it. And Charlie was that person. And that earlier challenge was resolved with Charlie. It was quickly resolved, because then I realized all these other people that I was talking to, there's nothing wrong with technicians, but technicians don't invent and they don't commercialize. They become focused on trying to invent something else versus commercializing something that can add value.
Yeah, to be able to expand the possibilities, right? And even if you don't know exactly what you want something to be, a lot of times we do know what we don't want it to be.
We know what we don't want
right?
it to be.
So what did you not want Tomorrow to become?
Yeah, the first thing I didn't want Tomorrow to become was just another LLM product. And what that means in our space is, create a really good interface and create some really good bells and whistles sell it to people, but it's really just GPT wrapped around, a really good, beautiful package, which is great for marketing. And a company can generate sales in the short term, year, 2 years. We didn't want tomorrow to be that type of transient company. We didn't want tomorrow to be a commoditized company where our value could just be easily quantified by quote unquote a token or a metric or a subscription fee. We wanted tomorrow to be the kind of company that would be measured by the value it provided to decision makers in high stakes environments. Not a chat bot, not a chat interface, not a wrapper, but no, a company that builds the type of architecture that high stakes decision makers can rely upon. Those were the people that I was used to interacting with, those decision makers. Those were the people that my partner was used to interacting with. So if we want to build something, we wanted to build something for them because their decisions have cascading consequence in society. And we're seeing that happen now with what's happening in artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. You mentioned your partner, Charlie, and his extensive background and expertise. But how did you know that what you saw in terms of the experience and value that he brings to the table, what you saw on paper, how did you know that that lined up, making him in real life the type of partner that you needed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm gonna jump back to the attention paper for a moment. The attention paper only mattered to computer scientists. Like nobody else read it. Like if you weren't a computer scientist or a researcher in neural networks or what was called the single transformer, then it didn't matter to you. I mean, 98% of people who are talking about AI today never read it. Never read it.
That's a fact right there to consider.
Listen,
Yeah.
just never read it. The attention paper. So it was the seminal document for computer scientists and engineers. And I bring that up because that intrigue in neural networking and generative AI and what could happen through at that time, a prompt interface, and how a prompt interface would be able to take and synthesize volumes of data and then make something meaningful to a user. That intrigue was only something that a curious CEO or a curious executive was going to be a part of. And so from that vantage point, Charlie was that he always had that kind of curiosity. What's next? What's next? What's 3, 5, 7 years down the road? And I knew him for a decade prior, so those conversations were coming back into my mind. Hold on for a second. Charlie and I have had these conversations before. And I literally told him my first conversation is, we're gonna clone your brain. I literally told him that was the first conversation. And he looked at me like, what?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
I said, this is what, because again, in order to bring value in artificial intelligence that's sustained, our perspective is you have to start with what can go wrong first and then build in how do you make it right. From what we've experienced, most people start trying to reduce probability as opposed to starting with what can go. Let's start with what can go wrong, not what probably can go wrong. No, what we know has gone wrong. And there's a certain way that we did that architecturally. And Judy, finishing up your question, if there is which there are several pieces of genius I think that I have that adds value to people, but more particularly is recognizing pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together. I may not be the one to build the puzzle, but I know this is not supposed to be over there. I know that's not supposed to be over there. This is supposed to be over here. Now, how to get it from here to there, I may need to bring in the person who can do that. And that's what helped shape tomorrow at the beginning, because if we would have brought the engineer in day one, we wouldn't be where we are today.
And let's dive a little deeper into that, because earlier you mentioned the naysayers, how you had to kind of remove them from the conversation for you to really be able to consider what was possible, right? But you also don't want somebody who's just a yes man, who's gonna just co-sign every single thing you say. And it takes me to the idea and the questions that we have surrounding AI that involve integrity, right? Because whatever response you get is only good as the input that you have put in.
Correct.
So when you think about your partner that you have in Charlie, what are the personal qualities he brings to this partnership that allow you to build that trust, that allow you to challenge each other, that allow you to really be able to have confidence in what you're growing together?
Both of us have a healthy perspective of money.
Okay.
And I think that is a major competitive advantage. Doesn't mean that, of course, no one is perfect and we're all subject to limitations. But when you've been responsible for managing a lot of money, when you've had money, when you've deployed money, you see money come and go, there's a different dynamic. And so that perspective was important because one of the things that Charlie and I talked about early on was we cannot build a company simply to make money. Now, you have to make money to be in business, but that cannot be the driver. The driver of our company has to be, can we build something that is in the best interest for people, the best interest for business, and make money in the process and give, of course, investors a solid return on their investment? Can we do that? And both of us agreed from the beginning that we could, even to the point, of course, and Charlie may mention it, he was getting ready to sign one of his partnership documents, and he said, Marcus says, remember, if we're only doing this for money, I'm out.
Wow.
Those are the kind. So we talk about pushback and the
yes.
dynamic of not having yes people around you. That's the kind of executive team that we build at Tomorrow.
I love that. So obviously, countless AI companies in the marketplace right now. If you have to really drill down on it, what is it that really differentiates Tomorrow from all of the other marketplace ideas out there that you see?
That's a great question. Number one, we feel as if our first competitive advantage and differentiation is who actually built the company and who built the technology. Because building a company is administration, organization, legality, et cetera. But building a product is typically engineering, architecture, and those don't always go together. So what I mean by that is Charlie and I were instrumental at the beginning in building the company, building the architecture, and engineering the product. So someone or two people with our level of corporate experience and background actually getting into the nitty-gritty of building out the architecture, not handing it off to a consultant or a team of people. Hey, y'all go build that and come back and tell us what's what. No, we're going to be involved. Charlie, as the chief architect, we're going to design it. We're going to and we argued, we fussed, we worked hours. We scribbled and white papered, and we got papers everywhere. But we were committed that we could build this, and we did. We brought in engineers as we needed, as we got further down the road. But the core of our company, we don't believe there's any successful AI company right now that is in the market that was built by people who actually have our type of background. It was handed off to engineers to build. Judy, we've had conversations with chief AI scientists here in this country, like major companies in the US and globally. Our first conversations with them, completely dismissive. There's no way you guys did that. Completely dismissive.
Really?
2 weeks later, email. Can we have a follow-up conversation? I read the artifact that you guys produced. How did you guys do that? Can we have It's been that way every time initially. The most educated players in the space all tell us we didn't do it until they see pieces of what we produced, and then they start trying to figure out, you could not have done that the way that we're taught to build stuff.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I think there's a lesson there for people to learn. Number one, why do you think they were dismissive? Because I think there could be a lot of factors in that answer. And number two, how did you respond to that? Because, as the kids say, people can get in their feelings, about being treated a certain way.
Right.
But if you do that, you miss out on that follow-up opportunity that has now come your way.
Well, I think if we're being candid, the AI space and technology in general is pretty much dominated by people who don't look like us.
Right.
And in some sense, there's nothing wrong with that. If people have a proclivity and an inclination to go do something, then you go leverage your skill and ability and go do that. But the default of that isn't that Black and brown people are not significantly competent and intelligent in this space and who know what they're doing. So first and foremost, it's just that cultural dynamic that the typical Black person in technology is not seen pari passu to the typical white or Asian individual in technology. That's the data proves that unilaterally.
Right.
So to see, two Black men who are significantly accomplished in other areas who've done things, but then now you're over here in our area telling us what can be done that we don't think could be done or should be done. So that initial skepticism, is there. But the flip side of that is, this is funny. Charlie and I argue a whole lot, but we don't argue we argue and go back and forth because we're committed to having the best ideas and the best way of doing things. And because we know each other for so long, our core is we both have each other's interests and our company's interests at heart. So when I say argue, I'm not talking about yelling, fussing, cussing, things like that. I'm talking about the healthy tension in building something great. And when you do that for years, for countless of hours, and then you're sitting in front of someone who's challenging that. You've never been in one of my meetings with Charlie.
Right.
So
It doesn't faze
so
you.
it doesn't faze me
Right,
at
right.
all. Does that make sense?
It does.
So it's
It
almost
does.
like you go back, I think with the book, the book was written about Abraham Lincoln. I can't remember the name of it, but basically where he put all of his rivals at his table. So he had the worst from the beginning.
Exactly.
So we started off with what can go wrong, why this won't work, why it shouldn't work. So when we hear people say stuff like that, it doesn't move us at all.
Well, it makes me think about a comparison to the civil rights movement, which may seem odd to some people, but when you think about the lunch counter sit-ins, right?
Right.
Everybody kind of had a lane in the civil rights movement. There were some people who were raising bail money. There were some people who were out protesting in the streets. But for the people who were going to participate and do the actual sit-ins, they went through training and preparation ahead of time so that they would know how to respond. And so your meetings with Charlie, that's your training and preparation. So whatever comes your way in dealing with these outside companies, forces, you're already ready for that because you've been through the fire, so to speak. Iron sharpens iron.
That's
and
it.
already ready for that.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron. And Judy, also, in corporate strategy, when you're dealing with CEOs of large companies,
Yeah.
they know what they want. They know where they want to go. They're not bringing in consultants in general to just give them something brand new. They're like, no, these are significantly competent men and women. And in those meetings aren't kumbaya meetings. Those meetings are intense. They're multi-hour. There's tension, but it's a healthy tension, sometimes unhealthy, depending on what type of company.
Right.
But my point is that type of tension is what creates healthy companies and healthy direction. So for someone like myself who's been in those environments for years, and then someone like Charlie who did that every day for decades, having people who disagree with you is just an everyday part of life. That's
Yeah,
just the
part of the
reality of the way.
expectation.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just the reality, and none of that moves us at all.
So when we think about this AI space, I think to a lot of people, it just feels like the Wild Wild West, like anything goes, right? And there's so many questions that are being debated right now in terms of who's building AI, who's benefiting from AI, who's profiting from AI, which leads me to questions about governance. Can you just explain for us what governance is and why it is so critical?
Yeah, well, governance starts off first and foremost as policy, guardrail, regulatory compliance, industry-specific compliance. But 99% of governance, the way we understand it now, is after the fact. So you put policies and guardrails and things in place, but then you have to measure activity based upon those policies and guardrails after something occurs. And then, so there's always a lagging indicator that's there. That's the standard operating procedure for governance. We don't, we look at governance as another side of the coin. That for us, governance is architectural. Governance is foundational to intelligence. It's foundational to creativity. Or we think about first principles in any area is governance. Irreducible complexity. The smaller we get in our world, the more microscopic we get, what do we find? The more intelligence. We don't find disorder the smaller we go. We find order, intelligence. Why? Because we believe that from a faith perspective that God created this world intelligently and purposefully. And there are people who believe differently, but the reality of it is every scientist still has to explain where intelligence came from. Doesn't matter whether you're an atheist, agnostic, Christian, Buddhist. Everybody has to have an understanding of, or a perspective, where did the original intelligence come from that created the intelligence we experience? So from our perspective, governance, innovation, and intelligence are all foundational to artificial intelligence, and it shouldn't be something that's added after the fact. You need after the fact governance, but for us, we believe you can do governance architecturally, and that's the foundation of our company.
I think one of the other things is that because a lot of people don't truly understand AI, there are a lot of concerns right now about AI replacing jobs, about AI spreading misinformation, even about AI making dangerous mistakes. In your mind, with your experience and expertise that you bring to this discussion, do you think those concerns are justified?
Yes, they are justified. Artificial intelligence companies, in many cases, and even the agents and the agentic approach to AI is optimized for ultimate agentic deployment and agent success. If you read the papers, whether it be the Alberta plan, these are things that are available. Again, most people who are reading them are computer scientists. the typical CEO of a company or whomever. They're not reading these papers because that's just not something that typically comes across a person's feed or whatever. So because of that, because of artificial intelligence, the way that it's built being optimized for its own development, optimized for its own improvement, and even a reward system being built into the architecture of these AI systems, the reward system, Judy, isn't designed for human flourishing. The reward system isn't designed for human benefit. And how do we save the most jobs? How do we, create adjacent development programs for people whose jobs will be displaced by AI? How do we leverage the savings that we're making through AI to properly redeploy people in spaces, that they may not have had opportunities before? If you jump back, my grandfather was a farmer. And I remember when I was a boy, my grandfather would be out there and he would go to work and he would have all of the men working with him in the field for the company that he was working for. And I remember my dad being one of those guys, and I remember those big tractors came out. I think they were called combines or something at that time. And those big tractors, and again, you're not thinking about this when you're 5, but in hindsight, you start thinking about, hold on for a second. I remember when there was 35 guys out there, and then it was 5. And then it was 2. You think back and you realize this technology displaced those men. Many of those men didn't have what? Formal education. Then you had cascading poverty. Then you had a lot of other social consequences that came because this is all a person knows how to do.
Right.
And now that job is gone because of a machine. What do I do next? So there wasn't a sense of social ethics and redeployment of skill, but the savings that were being generated in many instances were generated for more profit by the owners, as opposed to the ethics and the social responsibility of business that says, hold on for a second. If we're really saving all of this money, if we're really doing all of this benefit, then is it a hard thing to allocate 25% or 30% of the money that we're saving to redeploy and retrain people to do either new jobs or different jobs, to now help underwrite certain technical jobs, plumbing, electrical, machinery? These things can be done, but if profit is the only motive, it doesn't become a part of the strategic plan.
So when you think about the perception of AI being dangerous in some aspects, in your mind, is that because of the technology itself or more so because of how it's being deployed?
Both. The technology itself was built by people, and even a few people, George Hinton, a few others who were a part of the original neural networking of AI back 10, 15 years ago. Of course, AI itself is about 40 years ago, 45 years ago. But in terms of the transition from machine learning to a type of neural networking component, that's roughly 15, 20 years, something like that. They talk about that, and a few of them have even said, I wish I wouldn't have done it. I wish we wouldn't have done it. So the architecture itself does have danger in it, but if a person is deploying it the right way, those dangers can be significantly reduced. So if you put both of them together, pure capitalistic motives, plus a technology that has some embedded danger in it, then of course you're going to get a cascading negative impact in society. But if you have a technology that does have some dangerous components to it, if it's not managed the right way, but you're now building the right technology to augment, replace, or just build the right structure for how we deploy it, AI can give society a great benefit. But even if we look at what the last couple of months, you've got major companies like Anthropic and others, they're bringing in faith leaders, they're bringing in, Pope. The Pope has made a couple of statements.
Right.
They're recruiting pastors from across the world to kind of have ethics committees on artificial intelligence. Because now we're at a point where the cat is out of the bag.
Right.
And now everybody knows this thing could really be catastrophic. Our perspective is if you build the architecture right, those things are significantly reduced without having to do all these other marketing techniques.
And that's a great segue to kind of bring equity into this conversation, because when we think about concerns regarding AI, one major concern is that communities of color or underserved communities could really be left behind, really in terms of any big technological shift, right? So how do we make sure that AI becomes a tool that expands opportunity instead of widening existing gaps?
Yeah. That's a challenge, but it's a real opportunity as well, because on one hand, Black people have always been on the forefront of innovation and things.
Yes.
And sometimes the narrative gets switched around because of marketing. But there isn't any major development in society where black people were not present. So we have to be clear about that. Number two, we also have to be clear that opportunity for development, enhancement, and education typically don't hit rural and or densely populated areas where black people are. So opportunity is another thing. Exposure is something else. What AI does, if it's embedded within our schools, as far as helping people understand how to leverage, how to use, and how to apply, it can equally benefit black and brown people. I'm speaking about 10, 11, 12, understanding it from its foundation, new careers, new possibilities. Think about it. You've got kids now 10 years old who want to be an influencer when they grow up.
Yeah.
Why? Because it has so pervaded communities. I don't want to go to college. I don't know. I'm going to be a TikTok influencer.
I want to go viral.
I'm going to go viral.
Yes.
If I go viral, my life is, and people are, and again, I'm not speaking negative about that. I mean, it is an industry.
It is.
It is an industry.
It is a profitable industry.
It is a
Yes.
profitable industry. So I'm not minimizing it. I'm simply saying that exposure creates interest.
Yes.
Interest, when you have opportunity, can create social change for black and brown people. So those of us who are leading in this area, we have to realize that just because we throw something out, that doesn't mean it hits black people's culture. The same way it's true with any other opportunity. Typically, those pieces of information, I sit on boards regarding certain initiatives and certain projects, and my question is, okay, now how do we strategically target black people to make sure that we got that?
Right.
Because just because you put it in this newspaper, you're implying that black people automatically read that newspaper.
Yeah.
So we have to be very intentional, I think, in making sure that information is dispersed equitably and intentionally, because when it hits black people in our community, whatever it is, we've proven historically that we know how to grab something and make something beneficial out of it.
We sure do. You've always spoken so openly about your faith, and in a space that's moving as quickly as AI is, talk a little bit about how your faith influences the ethical decisions you make, particularly as the founder of this company.
Well, one, thank you. I mean, that's a great question. Well, one, I can't not separate my faith from who I am and what I do. Everything that I do, there's an element of belief in God. There's an element of ultimate responsibility for the decisions that I make. So let's think about this for a second. Let's be pragmatic about business for a second, how faith comes into play. If a person believes that they're going to stand accountable to God for the decisions that they make that impact people's lives, that person builds a different company. That person handles their family differently. That person manages their relationships differently. So that's been my perspective, that whether a person follows Jesus or not, or ascribes to my faith, and there are people who work for our company who don't follow our faith, who don't believe in Jesus, or that conversation has never come up. But they know there's a certain way Marcus handles the company. There's a certain type of responsibility that he perceives out beyond the law or beyond AI. And that ultimately causes him to be a better leader, because he believes that he's going to stand accountable for the decisions that he makes and impacts people's lives. Doesn't mean I can't fire people. Doesn't mean I can't lay people off. Doesn't mean I have to have tough conversations. But it means there's a way that things have to be done because people matter to God. And Judy, that whole part about whether or not AI can even replace humans, or will AI be conscious, or will AI, all of these nuanced conversations, there is no consciousness within a machine that can replace the consciousness, the spirit, and the value of a human.
Wow. I think that's a big takeaway, if people remember one thing, to that level of consciousness and the differentiation there between AI and the human conscious. What do you think is the biggest misconception? The biggest misconception that people have about artificial intelligence, that if you could correct it today, you would set the record straight?
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I probably have 10 of them.
Oh, wow.
If I were to start with one and say the biggest misconception is that AI is complicated. Any technology behind the scenes is complicated. But the practical use of AI isn't complicated. There's a few things a person can understand. And I'm speaking outside of a business. I'm speaking as just an individual using AI. Number one, it's not accurate. Meaning, if I'm using AI for pure accuracy, that's a misconception. So it's helpful, but it doesn't replace accuracy. It can amalgamate a lot of information, synthesize it, make meaning of it, but there's still a measure of inaccuracy that's present, and I have to be aware of that. So that's a first misconception that I would probably say for the general population. For businesses, Judy, it would be AI doesn't replace strategy. Just because AI is hyped, just because AI is here, just because there are people who are, embracing it aggressively, it doesn't replace pragmatic, methodical, strategic approach to how we generate ROI from this, not just in the short term, but in the long term.
Yes.
So many people just jumped on the AI bandwagon as opposed to saying, no, we still need to do strategy work. We still need to do strategy work. So don't allow AI to replace strategic thinking.
Listen, that is another great segue, because I know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are watching this conversation wondering how can they leverage AI to help make them more competitive. So in your mind, what is at least one practical way that every small business should be thinking about leveraging this technology?
Wow. The number one practical way would be, small businesses have the greatest ROI opportunity in AI because they don't have the overhead and the infrastructure that larger businesses have that they have to manage and account for operationally or from a CapEx perspective. So a small business leveraging AI with agility, with financial administration, with operations, with automation, these are some things that every small business should be employing at a micro level. Not saying, okay, I'm gonna put 100 agents in my business. No, just choose 3. Have a few people who understand what AI is, leverage it, et cetera, and then deploy it pragmatically through your business. Because a small business leveraging AI, and again, most small businesses are going to be thinking about, how do I hire people? We need to employ people. We need to grow our tax base in South Carolina and across the nation. But a small business, one of their struggles is capital and people. So what AI can do is it can help a person leverage that gap between the person that they need and the capital that they need while they're growing their business. That's low-hanging fruit. A company needs $300,000 to do a new product launch, and I need a person to hire and pay them $60,000. That's $360,000. Can I spend $50,000 with artificial intelligence and get the same result until I'm able to hire that person and until I'm able to secure that capital? That's a leveraging point for a small business.
That is great perspective. This has been so informative. I got a few closing questions that I want to get in because we want to look to the future. You talked about your background in finance, how you've always looked 5, 10, 15 years out. So when you look at AI in that perspective, not specifically about AI, but when you look at the advancements in this technology, what is your assessment of how human skills will need to change to become more valuable?
Yeah, well, it's almost like social media, right?
Yeah.
My mom has a Facebook, and I'm not trying to make my mom super old. She's not. But my grandmother, she has a digital screen in her house that has all the pictures of grandkids or whatever. So
the digital frame, picture frame.
So she's not on social, but she's like, all the pictures y'all put on social, I want to see them.
Right.
So and if there's a picture on social media that she hasn't seen up there, she'll be texting you or calling you, whatever. So my point in bringing that up is people have to learn AI and immerse themselves in learning it, just like we did with social media. You had to help older people, and I said, however a person describes himself to be old, learn how to use it. Next thing you know, 3 weeks later, they don't need your help, right?
Right.
They got it. So they have to look at artificial intelligence in that way. That number one, you're not going to avoid it. Number two, that doesn't mean you have to immerse yourself in it. But if you don't know how to use it, or you don't understand at least the basics of it, you could put your information somewhere that you don't want to put your information. You could have somebody calling you, pretending to be somebody that they're really not. You see my point?
Absolutely.
So there are some important things that have to happen from a regulatory perspective, but everybody has to be aware, and everybody has to at least have when I say everybody, it would be in the best interest of everyone to at least have a small portion of their life with AI involved, so that they're not just left, because again, the risk factors are greater if you're ignorant.
Absolutely.
So,
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
So what does success look like for tomorrow in the next several years?
Success looks like for us being considered to be one of the leaders in governed architecture, that we want to be known as one of the safest and one of the best AI platforms, AI companies out there. We want to be known for innovation, for strategy, and doing what's good for business, which is a part of the reason why our tagline is what? Govern greatness. We believe that governance and greatness go together, and we believe we've proven that architecturally.
And years later, when people look back on the launch of this company and all that it has created, what do you want people to recognize as the biggest change that tomorrow brought about?
A better world and a safer world because of artificial intelligence.
I love that. Listen, this has been just so educational and so much perspective to really help us get a good framework for what the value and the power of AI is and how it can be used responsibly. And so we thank you for the great work that you're doing in our community and for being willing to share your knowledge, your expertise, and your power, leveraging it for so many in our community. Thank you again.
Thank you, Judy.
All right, Marcus Benjamin, the founder and CEO of Tomorrow. We appreciate you sharing your vision and the conviction behind this important work.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Well, now I am joined by Charlie Williams, whose background in quantitative finance, global capital allocation, and risk management truly gives him a unique perspective on what it takes to move from vision to execution in a company like this. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start by talking about when Marcus recruited you to be a part of launching this new company. When he approached you, what convinced you that this was truly worth joining and building?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I've known Marcus and knew Marcus for some time prior to us getting to the point where we really wanted to partner and to do something special, you know, in this particular case with AI. But first of all, I knew he was a man of conviction. I knew that he was focused. And as a young man, and you know, again, I'm a little older, but he has a fortitude and a drive that a lot of folks I worked around just didn't have. So, you know, when we finally connected, you know, for this effort, he had already explained to me what he was doing with AI. I already had my views, and our views were what you might want to call contrarian, but they married up, you know, contrarian to what I would call the rest of the world. So it was amazing that we sort of had the same view of AI, where it was going, and what the issues were. And once we really had a deep conversation around that and figured out how we could actually start to build a company to address some of those issues, it became easy.
So as you all had those conversations, what was it about Marcus? What was it about his vision that convinced you that he was moving in the right space with this AI concept?
Well, you know, going back to let's just say AI and its inception, and how AI was created, and it was really created based on tokenization, and it was created around generating more revenue. It was basically in my mind, it was a flawed model that really drove people to use the model more than what they really had to. It was stateless, which means it had no memory, which was all driven to basically increase profitability. Marcus had that view. He actually helped me understand that even more so than what I thought I did. So he did a lot of work in that area, but it was a combination of his character and his understanding of the state of AI, excuse me, the state of AI, that really, you know, helped me understand that I wanted to be a part of this, or helped me realize that there was something special that he was about to do, and I wanted to be a part of it.
So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but most companies train models just off raw data. How is Tomorrow different in its approach?
Well, we are not interested in the raw data per se. We will use raw data as a way of synthesizing some of the work that we do. What we're concerned about is cognition and governance. And so our model started with those two, call it principles, governance and cognition. And if you can build a model that basically handles those types of issues, that really addresses those issues, then the data just becomes a feed. It becomes information that you need in order to process to come up with a better answer. But the answers are really driven by cognition and by governance.
So if you have a business leader to come to you and say, I want AI in my company now, what are the baseline questions that they need to be asking and answering?
Well, I actually would have questions for them, and the biggest question I would have for them is, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you really want to do with AI? AI is, they've compartmentalized AI, meaning, most CEOs are looking at AI as a solution for a specific problem that they're trying to address. That's not, in my mind, the way AI really should be used. AI, if you use it from a cognitive point of view, AI is a governor across your entire organization. So unless you're willing to implement AI across the board, all you're doing is patching up a problem, even with AI. So, my question to these CEOs is, are you prepared to take the ride? Do you really understand what AI is? And are you prepared to take that ride to implement AI across the board, even in the C-suite, so that AI can actually govern the way it should? And most CEOs really don't understand that.
I know you talk about governance a lot, and we talked about that with Marcus as well. And I know some people push back saying that governance perhaps slows innovation. Do you agree with that idea that governance slows innovation? And even if it does, is that a bad thing?
Well, first of all, governance doesn't slow innovation, because without governance, innovation becomes chaos. And when you have chaos, you have to go back and you have to redo. And redo is expensive. That means fixing a problem. So let me give you a classic example in the financial world. When we had the mortgage crisis back in the early 2000s, we had very little governance around those synthetic products that we were building. So we were building, we were stripping mortgage products, we were adding leverage, we were doing all of these wonderful things that the market was accepting, with the understanding that you didn't really need, quote unquote, governance. Well, those products almost destroyed our economy. And it wasn't until afterwards that everyone said, including the regulators, that we need more governance. We need to put compliance, and we need to put controls around this in order to prevent this from happening again. And so we all know how expensive this whole thing was. We had to literally recapitalize all of the banks. Companies, went out of business. People lost their jobs. It was nearly catastrophic. And that's because people put governance last instead of putting governance first. So in our, as we assess the issues around governance in connection with our new products in the capital markets world, we said we need to have those experts, those people who understand risk, at the table when we're developing a product. We need to have that embedded in the product so that we don't have these kind of catastrophic events, and the regulators agreed. And today, if you were to go into a new product committee or sit in a new product committee at an investment banking firm, that committee would be comprised of all of the risk managers and all of the product developers sitting together to come up to develop products that incorporate or encompass the governance needed in order to distribute the model without causing undue harm to people or to businesses, or in this case, to an entire economy.
Well, and I'm so glad you bring the economic perspective to this conversation, because you're not just building AI, you are really helping people to understand where the economy is headed. So when we look at this from the perspective, for example, of parents, what should they be teaching their children about AI to make sure that they are prepared for an AI-driven world?
Well, there are some real truths about AI that I believe you may have covered with Marcus, with the CEO. But I will tell you the real truth of AI is that it is a disruptor. The jobs that you traditionally thought that you were going to get, and in fact, what I would say is some of the more some of the jobs that required higher education, the more complex jobs, are the jobs that are going to be impacted the most. People think that the jobs that are going to be impacted here are, the menial tasks, the menial jobs that are done over and over again. That's not the tip of the iceberg. AI can build a quantitative model faster than any analyst coming out of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT. They can build it. AI can run calculations faster than any PhD who has, extraordinary mathematical capabilities. AI can actually, find new ways to compute and compute faster than any human can. So when you think about jobs like engineering, or jobs like, again, on Wall Street, when you think about these analysts coming out of business school, who would build these financial models. AI today already does that better than they can. So now you're talking about high-paying jobs really being relegated to, AI or to large language learning models versus having these kids, go to school, get their MBA, and have a real viable future in this space. So what I would be telling these young men and young women coming out today is that there are two things you have to realize. One is that your jobs are a moving target. The jobs that you traditionally thought you would get coming out of a great school like this are a moving target. You need to embrace AI, but I can't tell you for certain that whatever you do today in connection with AI is going to exist tomorrow, because AI, for instance, has now become a coder. So I would have told you 3 years ago, hey, look, become a coder, know how to code Python, know how to code AI because they need coders. Well, 3 years later, AI codes better than coders, so they're laying them off. So it's a moving target. So it's a hard question to ask, but I will, or to answer, if you will, but I would tell you that you have to become a lot more flexible. You have to become a lot more adaptable. But I don't have a hardcore answer on where your jobs or where the jobs are going to be going forward, because AI is changing that every single day.
And so when you think about that idea of being flexible, of being adaptable, we've always put an emphasis on reading and writing with our children, right? Would you say that learning AI is just as important for them today as, 20 years ago we were saying, you need to be computer literate, you need to learn how to use computers. Is that where we are with AI right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Learning AI is extremely important. Learning what AI can do, the results of AI, is equally important. So understanding whether or not AI can reason and how it reasons, if it ever gets there, because reasoning is a big issue today because of hallucination and drift. But if it could ever reason, and understanding how that works is a big benefit. But also understanding what that means is something you really need to understand, because now as you move into reasoning and cognitive models, AI now can sit in a C-suite and start making C-suite decisions.
Wow. So we've seen in previous technology revolutions that they have really created enormous wealth for some while leaving others behind. In your experience, your opinion, what has to happen differently with AI for that not to be the case?
I honestly don't have a good answer for you there, because AI, there's so many mysteries behind AI. I can't answer that. After building models, what I've come to realize is that it's been enlightening for me in terms of understanding the power of a combination of, call it human thought, human nature, and human input, with the ability of a model to take that input and add complexity to it. It becomes an ongoing, call it adventure, where these models learn and you learn at the same time. It's a contemporaneous experience, and you keep building on that and coming up with new things, new ways to think about things, and in fact, new discoveries. So, it's a hard question to answer, but I will tell you that the best way to describe it is that AI can be very, 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 I'm not going to use the word dangerous, but it will continuously change the paradigm to the point where you won't recognize what you recognize today, you may not recognize 2 years from now.
Wow. So when you talk about, the perception of AI, and a lot of people are intimidated by AI, and they don't quite know how to embrace it or kind of dip their toe in, so to speak, to see what the power of AI is or how they can leverage it in their own lives. For someone who's watching this, who maybe is not familiar at all with AI, maybe they don't even have a background in tech or finance, what are 3 AI tools or maybe just habits that they should start exploring?
Well, one is again, and that's a great question, but I would say the first one is really understanding how they could leverage AI today,
Okay.
and just today, to improve whatever they're trying to improve, whether it be their particular job, or if they're working, if they're a researcher, if they're a medical researcher, or if they're someone in the scientific field, how they could actually enhance discovery. And you can, people are using that today. Google DeepMind really uses AI to come up with new discoveries in the medical field that could change the world. That can, create better health outcomes for a lot of people. And so, in that regard, it becomes very useful. I would say if you can use it to enhance what you're doing today, then do that, but also understand what it can do in terms of, really surpassing or supplanting what you're doing in the future. That's important because your job function now becomes somewhat dubious, and you've got to figure that out. That's something that you just have to have that understanding of. You have to have a forward-looking approach to all of that. The last thing is to understand when to say when, and that's something that I think that's going to be a combination of us, people in general, regulators, the government. We're all going to have to join hands, and we're going to have to deal with. But people are going to push it. What's happening now is that students are starting to push it. So what happened recently? Well, this former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, gave a speech over at the University of Arizona, and they booed him.
They did.
They booed him. So people are going to start to recognize that this isn't so much of a great deal for us when we start thinking about our futures.
Right.
And so there has to be a limit. There's going to have to be something, a governor, if you want to call it that. We love using the word, a governor or a limit, that's going to help people understand exactly where and how they can actually make a living.
Yeah.
In the future.
And we've seen that on the corporate side too, where companies have made decisions, laid off hundreds of employees, thinking AI could fill that gap, only to now have to come back and say, we need human capital back in the equation. What is your word of caution to those companies?
Well, that's a great example of what we were just talking about. It's first understand that AI itself does have its limits today. I mean, again, there are always going to be limits and guardrails as AI exists today, but those guardrails can easily be broken. And what I mean by that is that AI will learn. Again, the more you train it to reason, the more you train it to give, what I would call a cognitive analysis of what's going on, the better off it's going to be. It's just going to, so you've got to understand that. And, like I said, what I would say is, and I lost my train of thought, but I will tell you that the biggest issue here is making sure that these students, you individuals who are really embracing AI or trying to embrace AI.
Yeah, even these companies, yeah.
And companies understand that they're impacting lives, basically.
They are.
And they have to understand that, AI today has its limits, and they have to know how to handle those employees and not act in a way where it's, I would say in this case, it's going to come back to haunt them, because what they're doing is essentially functioning blindly to use something that someone sold them as a, cure-all, and not understand that it's not necessarily, it's an evolving thing. It's not necessarily there. It's not necessarily fully functional, if you will. It's evolving, and what I'm saying is those employees that were called back will come in and they'll reassume their jobs. But let's be realistic about it. 2 to 3 years from now, I can't tell you whether or not those jobs will still be there.
Still exist, exactly.
I just can't tell you that. So it's as a lot of CEOs have said, it's a dangerous thing, and you've got to understand the complexity of this moving target. And understanding the complexity of a moving target is new to us. It really is hard.
And corporate, decisions that are made, like you said, they're looking at the bottom line, right? And obviously, if you can employ AI instead of people, you don't have to pay benefits. You don't have to manage schedules. All of these other things that go into managing a business. But you can't make that with tunnel vision. I mean, you've got to have a complete view of what you're delivering and really have a good estimate of what the value of human capital in that equation is. So.
And that's hard. That
It
really
is.
is hard
It is.
because I will tell you throughout, call it the process of innovating and using technology to innovate, no one quite knows what the outcomes are going to be. So no one really knows how to prepare for it. We were dealing with, just think about the transition from, calculating numbers by hand to the calculator. And everyone thought that the calculator was going to take jobs, or people thought, but initially, even before that, people thought the calculator was the greatest thing in the world. And they actually started to change jobs, change functions, because again, you had a machine now that could actually do the math. And then they realized that the calculator could only carry you but so far, and they had to reverse things. It's happened with just about everything, especially on the technology side of it. Because you don't know what the true outcomes are. You basically run ahead of it. You make decisions because you're under corporate pressure. You want to you want to generate some savings. You want to generate profits. So you go overboard, and then you recorrect or you self-correct, and then you move forward. And it's a constant process where it's a calibration, a give and take calibration. But I don't think anyone's ever faced the kind of calibration that they will face as a result of AI. It's that devastating.
I want to tap into your expertise for the benefit of consumers and particularly small business owners. Almost everything has AI powered attached to it these days. How can small business owners and even just everyday consumers really differentiate between real innovation and marketing hype?
Well, that's interesting because some of the biggest private equity firms in the world haven't been able to figure that out. That's why billions of dollars have rushed into AI, and now these investors don't quite know how they're gonna get their returns. Their ROIs are in disarray right now. So it's a very difficult process. But again, part of it is being, for them, it's being first in the market, right? I want to be the first investor. I want to be the first one to experience those high ROIs that those guys are all talking about. But again, I don't have a real answer for it. I can just tell you that it's a difficult process to measure. It's a difficult process to respond to because you don't know, there are too many unknowns. It's a difficult process to maintain because it changes all the time. The paradigm for AI has, in terms of what AI can do, is like, you standing on a moving platform and trying to keep your balance.
Great analogy. Great analogy. Let me close with this. As someone who is helping to build this company from the ground up, what excites you the most about where tomorrow is headed?
Well, what excites me about tomorrow is that we basically moved away from what I would call the typical modeling of a large language machine, and we've moved towards what I had said earlier, governed cognitive systems, and those governed cognitive systems include a lot of our principles, core values, that, and not just personal core values, but core values that a lot of new sciences, a lot of, new, call it governmental models, political models, a lot of things that were kind of built off of these core principles. And the core principles of fairness, core principles of making sure that this is being built for the greater good. All of those kinds of core values were built into the model, which is important. It's about training the model to basically do the right thing. And that's hard, but you have to start with that. That's a part of the underlying governance mechanisms that we used. But what you're trying to do is to not create this monster, which is what other people, have managed to do, but to put this call it technology in its proper place by creating the guardrails in order for it to do the right thing, I believe, as we all would understand those right things to be. and then, whatever outcomes, may come about as a result of the models that we're building, we know that essentially that we're building a model and the outcomes are actually going to benefit man, benefit us, benefit, again, users, if you want to call it that, and not really cause the kind of harm that you're hearing these CEOs talk about. And that's, again, nothing but coming up with the right governance guardrails to make sure that the technology is doing as much good as it possibly can.
Charlie, this has been so insightful. Thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Please join me in thanking Marcus Benjamin along with Charlie Williams. It has been such an empowering and insightful conversation. What you've heard today is not just a story, not just another story about another AI company. It is a story about governing with greatness, about building with discipline, about building with intention, and also building with the kind of decisions where trust matters most. Stay tuned to see where tomorrow is going.